Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2010's Red Dead Redemption, the game that took the open world formula of Grand Theft Auto and applied it to the Wild West frontier.
After that, it's 2004's SLY 2 Band of Thieves, a sequel that completely changed the format of the series and let players take part in intricate heists.
So it may seem like an unusual pairing of games, I will say, but it's a pretty easy theme this week. When we throw these games together and try to find a theme, it's easy to say, oh, Gangs of Outlaws for Red Dead Redemption and for SLY 2. So
this is probably the easiest one we've had in weeks.
Kind of surprising on that front. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty all right. Been very busy, though. What with other podcasts, and schoolwork, and work, and it's been a lot. But hey, we're here.
The holiday season cannot come here soon enough. I have my cough returning with a vengeance. And through the power of editing, you haven't noticed for like the past 4 weeks, but it got better, and then now it's not. So I'm struggling, but hanging in there. So it should be a fun episode this week, maybe a little shorter than usual. I feel like, we're kind of crunching on this one. There's not as much information available, but we'll still try to deliver a fun educational experience for you all, filled with music. But first, we got to touch up on the composers that we've been following throughout the course of the show and what have they been doing with their careers in the past week's headlines and some composer follow-up news. Persona 5, The Royal, is out now in Japan. And, people have been studying live streams and things like that. But most importantly, on a music front, it means more music from Shoji Meguro. And so, music from him. I don't think Lotus Juice is on any of them, but I've seen some credits with them. But anyway, it's mostly Shoji Meguro. And the music's out there. If you want to check it out on YouTube, here's a sample of one of the best songs. Gonna be a show to remember.
I haven't had a chance to listen to any of it yet. I do know that I didn't watch any of this stream, but there was a man named Tim Berry, who is now my hero, who has already finished the game. And at time of recording, he finished it yesterday, 19, finished it in about 46 hours.
It must be nice to be 19 years old to do that with your life.
I wish I had that kind of time.
I mean, but that poor guy, resting it off, sleeping it off. But yeah, that's going to be my personal soundtrack for the next several months. So thank you, Shoji Meguro.
In other news, Toby Fox, continuing to have the best year ever, has announced that he did indeed compose a song for Pokemon Sword and Shield. I don't believe we know what song it is. We haven't heard it yet. But he has said that he composed a song for a Pokemon game, so boy, he keeps coming up.
Makes sense with the Game Freak connections after, Little Town Story. Little Town Hero. I can't even remember what that game's called.
Little Town Hero.
Little Town Hero, yeah. But, Toby Fox is just out there living his best life, so there you go. And finally, Michiru Yamane is putting on a Bloodstained Ritual of the Night themed concert in Japan on November 10th. Specifically in Minamiaoyama, Japan.
Yeah, I was reading the outline and was like, boy, I'm sure glad that's number 3, so Peter has to read that name.
But she's putting this on with her sister. I guess they have like a duet sort of pair group between the two of them, as well as along with a string quartet. So if you're in Japan, in Minamiaoyama, and you want to check out a Bloodstained themed concert with Michiru Yamane, there you go.
I would love to go to that. I'm not in Japan or in Minnie Mouse. I'm not going to try and say it because I'm going to... No, screw it. Let's do this. Minami Oyama.
Yeah.
I think that's probably right.
Nice job. Yeah, there you go.
Anime, you haven't failed me yet.
All right. Well, let's talk about the first of our 2 games this week, and I'll be talking about Red Dead Redemption. I was tempted to actually first talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. I think that was going to be the original plan, because that makes sense with today in particular. And it's, that's also a great soundtrack. It really is. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I've actually beaten Red Dead Redemption. I feel like I can speak to that game a little better than I can its sequel. And fortunately, the same composer worked on the game. Not in a full capacity, composed with someone else for this game, but it all ties together nicely. So when we're talking about the original Red Dead Redemption, we have to go back to the game Red Dead Revolver. Because everyone's just like, Red Dead 2 is, Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, well, it's technically Red Dead 3, because Red Dead Revolver is the first game in the Red Dead series. And it has a very interesting history that I learned, for the first time. Red Dead Revolver, it's a game that started development under Angel Studios in 2000. And I think it's Angel Studios because apparently the company started in 1984. But actually, I think the founder was Diego Angel. The whole, how it's it's Angel. With a name like Diego, it's probably Angel. But anyway, Angel Studios, as we know them. Development started on this game in 2000. And there was publishing support from Capcom. They wanted to make it this Wild West arcade shooter that was intended to be a spiritual successor to 1985's Gunsmoke. But in November 2002, Take-Two Interactive, which is the video game holding company for both Rockstar Games and 2K Games, Take-Two announced that they had acquired Angel Studios, and they renamed them Rockstar San Diego. After this, Capcom canceled Red Dead Revolver, but then Rockstar acquired the IP rights. They picked it back up. They finished the game, publishing it on PlayStation 2 and Xbox on May 4th, 2004. Development on a sequel began shortly thereafter in 2005. And that brings us to Red Dead Redemption, which was released on May 18th, 2010 in North America for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. PAL Regions got the game on May 21st of that year, so only a few days later. The easiest way I would say to play the game today, if you never have, is to get an Xbox 360 version of the game and play it through backwards compatibility on Xbox One. Because this is one of the very few Rockstar games that is not available on PC. You think that would be the easiest way to play it, but no Red Dead Redemption on PC. The game is developed by Rockstar San Diego and published by Rockstar Games. Red Dead Redemption is a third-person open-world game that takes place on the Western frontier. That's the whole big environment with that open world. Gameplay is inspired, certainly, by Rockstar's most popular franchise, Grand Theft Auto. There is a gunslinger gameplay mechanic called Deadeye, which allows players to slow time down and mark multiple shooting targets on enemies. The time speeds back up, and then it's pretty flashy. There's also a morality system that kind of influences the whole world, whether you're good or bad actions. Influences how the world and the characters look at the protagonist. The story takes place in 1911 in the United States, and players are experiencing the world of Red Dead Redemption through the eyes of John Marston. Now, John Marston is a former outlaw who has had his wife Abigail and his son Jack taken away from him and placed into custody by government agents. See, the government tells John that he'll be able to see his family again, and all of his past crimes will be wiped away on a clean slate if he hunts down the former members of his old gang. Now, John says, oh, okay, I got to do this. So he goes and confronts Bill Williamson and his men over at their Fort Mercer stronghold. And it doesn't go so well. John is shot and left for dead. But he is rescued by a rancher named Bonnie McFarlane. Now, John is at his lowest point possible, and he'll have to make acquaintances with people throughout this environment and build up whatever standing he can make in the world if he hopes to see his family again. So the questions being here, where are the members of John's old gang? And can John live happily ever after with his family? So Joe, this is where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Red Dead Redemption?
Never played it. I've never touched either, any of the Red Dead games, actually. I haven't really played a lot of Rockstar games in general outside of just dicking around in some Grand Theft Auto games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what stopped me ever from taking a look at the first Red Dead Redemption. Obviously at that time I didn't know Red Dead Revolver existed, which seems to be the case for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly enough, or maybe not weirdly enough, since Rockstar called the next game Red Dead Redemption 2. And I haven't played that one either. I haven't played the second one either. So pretty much nothing.
Well, hopefully this is a learning experience then, because for me, I feel like I bought the game maybe within a year or two of it coming out. I wasn't like an at-launch sort of player. I never really have been a Rockstar Games player, actually. But the first one I ever really got into was actually LA Noire. And I've shared that story before where, I bought my PS3 like you in 2011. It was around May of that time. So it was probably about a year after Red Dead Redemption was technically out, but I like the idea of LA Noire more. I played the crap out of that game. We'll talk about that game eventually on a future episode. I count on it. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption was never one that I kind of, really jived with. If anything, I always remember that was one of the first video games I remember a very intense video advertisement campaign on YouTube, on video game websites, to the point of it being excessive. And, remembering certain things like, John Marston saying well, it's either going to be me or you. It might as well be you. And it's little things like that. It's just, you remember how excessively it was advertised. So when I did eventually get around to playing it, probably, a year or two after it came out, I started it. I liked it, but it didn't really sink its teeth into me yet. And so something else came up, played other games. It would take me until August 2016 before I would get around to trying it again. And this was through the backwards compatibility on Xbox One being available. So I'm like, all right, kind of upscales textures. I want to see how well this runs. And I really should play this game. It's one of these very highly critically reviewed games. And so I played it and just could not stop. It really sunk its teeth into me then. I think it's another example of sometimes you got to give games another chance. Because I loved that experience with Red Dead Redemption. Got around to buying 2 digitally at launch. And I had the same sort of thing where I tried a little bit of it and it did not sink its teeth into me. So if all stands to reason, we're going to wait until PlayStation 5 comes out. A few years down the road, I'll try it again and I'll love Red Dead Redemption 2. But it's just one of those things. I don't know. I don't always get along perfectly well with Rockstar games, but certain ones just hit the right spot.
I don't know what it is about. I think it's just the same reason I don't play a lot of big open world games is just I gravitate towards something where it's all right, go here next. And which is weird because I do have a lot of open world games. It's not GTA like games that I dislike because I love Saints Row. Saints Row is fun. I had a good time with Saints Row 3 and 4 and kind of 2 until I got to a motorcycle level. And those play like GTA games, but what I've played of GTA 5 I enjoy, but I've just never found any sort of magnetism for me towards Red Dead, and I'm not 100% sure why, because I like Western stuff. Western stuff is cool. It's a cool period of history. I don't know.
It does take a certain feeling to it. And that's interesting if because you could easily write it off and say, well, I just don't like Westerns. Okay. All right. Fine. Fair enough. But I don't know. It's something that I feel like it does take a little bit to really sink its teeth into you, for better or for worse. But it is a remarkable game with a very interesting soundtrack. And I would like to talk about that today, certainly. Now, development on the game, as I mentioned at the beginning there, did begin in 2005. It involved more than 800 people around the world, apparently, to develop, which is just bananas. It was one of the most expensive video games ever made at the time, with a full budget between $80 and $100 million. Again, that may pale in comparison, but at the time, coming up in 2010, that was pretty wild. Now, Rockstar was certainly intrigued by the power of next-generation consoles when they started in 2005, and they wanted to create this open-world environment, and they saw the Western frontier as an untapped subject for that kind of world. They carried the shooting mechanic from Red Dead Revolver over with, the Deadeye system and all that, but everything else changed to properly fit the open world. Developers made trips to the Library of Congress for documents about this time period. They traveled to the southwestern U.S. to take different pictures of the desert, and they studied plenty of Western films. Even though the game was originally shown as a tech demo in 2005, the game was officially revealed by Rockstar on February 3rd, 2009. Just as overall saying that this is the game, it exists. A reveal trailer came a few months later on May 6th, 2009. This is a game that near the end of its development, it had to be pushed about a month back just for polishing things. So May 18th in North America for 2010. I think the most fascinating thing about Red Dead Redemption, just about the game, about its history, and like the mythos outside of the game, is all about a man named Rob Wheathoff. Now, Rob Wheathoff is an actor who moved to Los Angeles to pursue big dreams. He lands the video game role of a lifetime, and then he walked away from the industry. I think John Marston is one of the best, well-realized protagonists in video game history, and it's honestly due to Wheathoff's performance. It's so natural, it's so genuine, it's unlike anything you've ever heard before as far as like his voice, but it's so powerful. And I think if you have any interest in Red Dead Redemption in this, if you have not seen the 9-minute video feature that Polygon made, it's on YouTube. It's called Finding John Marston. And it's like a 9-minute little biography about Rob's story. It is fascinating. Absolutely one of my most favorite things about this game's history. And it does, kind of come back full circle, because when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out last year, look who's back to play the role of John Marston. It's Rob Wheathoff. But he didn't do anything in video games like since then. You'd think this man would have a stellar career based on that one performance, and he just walked away from it all. In the ages of, Nolan North and Troy Baker, like, Rob Wheathoff may have been able to have it all. Just, it's such an interesting story, and I do highly recommend it. But as far as this game being critically reviewed, it's reviewed remarkably well. Metacritic score of 95, which, that's pretty rare air for a lot of games.
Most of the time when we talk about games, they're like in the 80s or the like high 70s.
Low 90s, maybe at like the highest point, but there's only a handful of games that get 95 and up. So this is one of the best games of that generation with Xbox 360 and PS3. And honestly, I think the only really critical part of reviews or middling reception was the game's multiplayer mode. I didn't know that the game had a multiplayer mode. Shows what I played the game for and only remembered, but
I also didn't know that.
Yeah, so if anything, like that was like the only knock against the game, because it's just a remarkable an amazingly well-made campaign. The soundtrack in particular, though, because we like to talk about the music for the game, was also highly praised by critics, noting how it really sounded right out of a Hollywood film. And, all of that advertising that I mentioned, all of those great reviews, it translated to incredible sales. As of February 2017, Red Dead Redemption had shipped over 15 million units, which for only an Xbox 360 and PS3 game, not a PC game, yeah, that's pretty amazing. The game did win plenty of awards, including Game of the Year at the Spike Video Game Awards and the Game Developers Choice Awards. The score in particular also highly awarded. Won Best Original Score and Best Song in a game at the Spike Video Game Awards. It won Best Audio at the Game Developers Choice Awards. And the score also won the top prizes at something called the Game Audio Network Guild that year.
Fun fact, that might come up in a second.
Indeed. More on that later. The game received a zombie-themed DLC expansion called Undead Nightmare on October 26th, 2010. This was bundled in Game of the Year releases of Red Dead Redemption. And then you had Red Dead Redemption 2 that released 8 years to the day after Undead Nightmare on PS4 and Xbox One. This was a prequel to the Red Dead Redemption story. So yes, you did have a younger John Marston appear in it. And yes, Rob Wheathoff played him, again, remarkably well. And that game, if we're talking about like review scores and all that Metacritic for that game is a 97. So like Rockstar knows how to make really, really critically acclaimed games. Yeah, so that's certainly something. It's relevant today, of course, because Red Dead Redemption 2 is out today on PC. And so that's a big deal for that one. It'll also be a launch title on Google Stadia later this month on November 19th. The music for Red Dead Redemption is partially responsible by Woody Jackson. Woody Jackson and Bill Elm, or Bill Elm and Woody Jackson, are the main people who worked and composed this soundtrack. But Woody Jackson is an interesting character and has quite the career at Rockstar. So I feel like there was more about him. Plus, he was like the sole composer for Red Dead Redemption 2. So when plans change, it's like, well, we still get to talk about Woody Jackson. And I definitely learned a lot, and I'd like to share that with you. So he was born Woodrow Wilson Jackson III on June 10th, 1970 in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Raised in York, Pennsylvania and Richmond, Virginia.
For some reason, that is the most this man will go on to write music for a cowboy game name I've ever heard in my entire life.
Woodrow Wilson Jackson III. Woody Jackson. Well, maybe it's like, I don't know. Is it maybe because of like Woody and Toy Story and he's a cowboy? I don't know.
Maybe. It's great, though.
Yeah, it totally works. He attended Virginia State University, where he took harmonica lessons, of all things. Didn't say what his major was or anything like that, because he actually dropped out when he ran out of money. And he turned to playing guitar with the band The Useless Playboys. He eventually moved to Los Angeles in 1992, where he did things like he played in bands, he worked at a guitar shop, and he worked as a session musician for different Hollywood projects. Now, we've talked about the Play for Japan initiative before. This was the 2011 tribute album to help raise money for the Red Cross after the Tohoku earthquake and tsunamis. Mm-hmm. We mentioned how it was organized by Akira Yamaoka. Laura Shigihara contributed with Jump, correct?
Yes, Jump, and then Bear McCreary also put something on that. And I'm sure we've talked about a couple others that were on that album, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thread that like we find ourselves keeping on coming back to, because apparently Woody Jackson also contributed a song to that album called Moshi Moshi. So another one into that web. He had an interesting quote about his approach to composing music. He said, quote, "I'm trying to respect the past, but not ignore the present. I always try to approach music with an open mind, like a newborn baby, where everything is always fresh. when it leads to happy accidents, music can be a really magical thing. Woody Jackson is married to his wife Sharon and has 2 daughters, Georgina Washington and Theodora Roosevelt.
Something makes me think that the names in his family have a theme. Can't put my finger on it, though.
Just might a little bit, with, of course, still the last name of Jackson. So Woody Jackson, his discography when it comes to composing for games, there's Red Dead Redemption, there's Grand Theft Auto 5, and Red Dead Redemption 2. So a pretty amazing string of games right there, to be honest. He also composed some incidental music for LA Noire. For TV composing, he contributed compositions for the first season of Nashville. And his website said that he was a musician on soundtracks and scores for SpongeBob SquarePants. That's interesting. I think that's got to be a first of the composers we've covered.
Which is weird, because how? How is this the first time we've ever mentioned SpongeBob?
You'd think we would have, but I'm not sure. That's certainly interesting. He's also composed some films, but I didn't honestly recognize any of them. But I found it more interesting that he was a musician, again, a session musician, on scores for Oceans 12 and 13, The Devil Wears Prada, Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny, Youth and Revolt, and several other films. So I found that particularly interesting. When it came to the soundtrack and its history and development for Red Dead Redemption, like I mentioned, the score composed by Bill Elm and Woody Jackson. They're friends who met in 1995 through playing different bands in the LA scene, and they ultimately connected through the band The Friends of Dean Martinez. This score is especially notable because of its exceedingly dynamic nature. It is composed based on lots of stems, and their use, gets added and removed based on what is happening in game. Even to the point where it's like, they mention, like, if you're just getting on a horse, like this bass kick, fires up. So it's just this really dynamic score. And it's interesting to note because all these stems have to work together, right? So to maintain consistency, the score has a fixed tempo of 130 beats per minute, and everything is in A minor. Which, that's about, we'll say we don't often go in music theory and all that, but to have a consistent key and a tempo, you'd worry about it, sounding too samey. But I think it's because of the dynamic nature that it really doesn't. It does kind of have the same sound, of course, with the key. You're going to kind of hear the same sort of notes over and over again. But at the same time, they do enough and it's dynamic enough to really stand out. And obviously it won all sorts of awards. So it apparently took a long time to research how to, make this work with all the different stems and function properly in the in-game environment. But also as a result, when we're talking about an official soundtrack release that we're taking some of these songs from, that may not necessarily be the same experience that a player has in the game, except for a couple exceptions that we'll get to. But I just found that, it's really, really interesting to have it be so dynamic, but, lock the tempo, lock the key.
I wonder if other games that have used dynamic soundtracks had similar rules. Did Banjo-Kazooie have a similar rule, I wonder? I guess that doesn't really make sense. That's a different kind of dynamic soundtrack because it only had to match one song.
Right.
Weird. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's certainly, I think, different than most of the scores we've covered on this show before. The music was intended to imitate soundtracks of 1960s Western films, particularly Ennio Morricone's work on the Dollars trilogy, which is, A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I didn't know that was a third in a trilogy. So
I know that because I live with Ben.
Well, I think that makes sense. Yes. But so that was news to me. But of course, that was kind of what the public at large knows as the Western sound, right? Because during Jackson's research, looking back to the time in 1911, there was really no such thing as a Western sound back then. So they kind of had to lean into something that audiences would really identify with. 14 hours of music were composed for the game's main missions, over 15 months of work. By the time Undead Nightmare was included, this got up to about 24 hours of music. This was all recorded and mixed at Woody Jackson's personally owned studio in Los Angeles. He bought this studio, and it's called Vox Recording Studios, also known as Electrovox. This studio was apparently originally founded in 1931. Woody Jackson bought it in 2009, and it's apparently one of the oldest private recording studios in the United States. So, yeah, a studio that just isn't open to the general public. It's one of the oldest. I found that really interesting. Ended up being mastered at Capitol Studios in Hollywood. Lots of different unique instruments to add to that Western sound. The jaw harp is used for that traditional Western twang, the wang 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 kind of sound there. You of course have just these different unique sounds created through experiments to try to emulate what people think of as Western sounds. So one notable example was playing a trumpet against the head of a timpani drum, like the surface of that drum, just to kind of get it muffled a little bit. And then there were different musicians in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2, whether they're just, they're playing an instrument randomly to give flavor to the open world, or just needing a performer for certain instruments for the score. And certain examples of these musicians, one in particular, is the harmonica player Tommy Morgan. Tommy Morgan is apparently one of the most heard harmonicists in the world through his contributions to over 500 films playing the harmonica. And he lends his performance in this game as well, as does piano player John Kirby and Amir Yaghmai on the Stroh violin.
So basically what is being said there is, if you've heard a harmonica in a film, it was probably that dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like more likely than not. That's really cool.
And he apparently has, to his credit, like a few episodes of the original Twilight Zone as far as composing credits. So like going way back. Just amazing. What does this soundtrack sound like? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's get into our 5 critical tracks. And we have to start with theme from Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, it's the main theme. You're pretty much going to hear this tune a lot, just as kind of like the main theme, like John Marston's main theme. So yeah, you're getting all those kind of instruments in there with trumpets and some guitar, percussion. You're even getting some like horse galloping like sounds in there. This one is kind of more like, it's expansive a little bit. Really just sets the flavor in a way, and it just sets the mood really nicely. But if you're thinking of da 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 da, like that is this game's main leitmotif, the main stem, that if you want to get that injection in there, that's really this main theme.
So first, I wanna just go ahead and cover real quick. This is the first I've heard of any of these songs ever. Even this one. But even listening to it earlier, I did not pick up on the idea that it is the drums are horse galloping until you mentioned it. That's really cool. I like that touch. I like that touch a lot.
Yeah, it just really sets that environment really nicely. And I'm sure then if you live, with your roommate Ben, who loves Western movies, like you hear this and it's like, it is undeniably Western frontier as hell.
Oh yeah, this is Ennio Morricone for sure. Again, a name I only know because of my roommate. He grew up watching a lot of Western movies because his dad is really into Westerns. And so he's a big John Wayne fan at the very least. He might be an old school Clint Eastwood fan. I don't actually know. I know he likes The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and he likes the Dollars trilogy, and that's Clint Eastwood, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I think he is a fan of that. So yeah, like, I know of these things because of that, because I've been living with this man for like 3 years, and I've known him for 11 now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so when I hear any of these songs, really, I'm like, yeah, all right, that's about what I expect. Yeah. So he nailed the tone perfectly.
Yeah, and again, like we've always talked about, for the soundtrack, it's like just the distillation of like the ideal sense of what they'd want these songs to sound like. But again, with all these ideas of stems and dynamic scores, like it is not that for players, but like this is taking the 3D possibilities of game audio, game music that's dynamic, crushing it down to a 2D ideal experience. So it's very interesting to hear. So then when we compare it to number 2 on the Critical 5, we have The Shootist. So here you go. It's continuing riffing a little bit off that main theme. It's not it exactly, but it's really trying to echo and call it back. But there is a more deliberate, intense pace to this. And just think, like, it may sound faster, but it's still that same 130 beats per minute. But the rhythm of the percussion just really feels more driving. It's almost like you're chasing someone, maybe someone who's escaping the law or someone that you have to track down for whatever reason. But, compare that to like, the basking in the wonders of the environment. And you just feel how these maybe similar elements can create two pretty differently sounding songs.
Though this is still more Morricone. This one's more Morricone than the other one, actually, because of the whistling.
Uh-huh.
So, and I think that's my favorite part is the whistling, because I like a song you can whistle along to, and it helps when there's whistling in the song.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, I think this might be my favorite. Though there's one further down your list that might actually be my favorite for name alone, but this one I think as a song might be my favorite on your Critical 5.
I think the song that most people identify with when it comes to Red Dead Redemption, though, is number 3 on our Critical 5. This is Far Away.
Step in front of a runaway train, just to feel alive again, pushing forward through the night, aching just to lower side. It's so far away.
And now for something completely different. This is composed and performed by Jose Gonzalez. Jose Gonzalez is pretty notable for these like deep acoustic guitar strings that are really present in this song. He's got like this signature dual voice recording sections, and like the fidelity on his recordings is always like generally pretty crunchy as far as I've heard. So like it's a pretty unique sound that he has going for him. Far Away is notable in the context of Red Dead Redemption because you're hearing so much of this score that is very Western, very Morricone like. But then there's this moment where John Marston has to enter Mexico, and he's getting up on his horse and he's riding away, and this song starts playing. And based on the dynamic weather, the time of day, and all, I mean, it's still this gorgeous environment for Mexico, no matter what time of day you're playing as, no matter what the weather might be like. But this song, like, for vocals to come in is like shocking to what you've been hearing so far in the Red Dead score. And it's just this really beautiful moment that, like, it's playing and John's riding his horse and you're in full control. I mean, don't get off the horse. That would stop the song. Just embrace and enjoy the moment. But yeah, it's really tied to this moment of John entering Mexico. I was really close to having Jose Gonzalez's crosses on our Life is Strange episode. And I first learned of him from playing that game with that song. And I never realized that he did this song, this Far Away song. But going back to it, it's like, oh, yep, that is 100% him. I had never made that connection before. It's totally different, but it's really powerful. And I think that's why most people remember this song.
It's funny because there's actually a song, and I'm going to need to hear it let me part the curtain just slightly a little bit. I do listen to the clips like as Peter's talking just to make sure I've refreshed myself on what the songs are, because I have the memory of a goldfish with Alzheimer's. And there is one song later on the list, I believe, where I was like, this sounds like I'd hear it in Life is Strange. So to hear that that's not the one by an artist who actually had a song in Life is Strange is a bit of a weird feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a powerful moment in the game accompanied with a great song. Let's get back to the Western action, though, with number 4 on the Critical 5, Trigonometry.
This is the one. This is for name alone, this is my favorite song on the list.
What a good pun. It's so clever. The bass is really just kicking here. Really giving you a good pace. And again, it's another horse chase kind of song. Again, like with the Shootist, with this one, it's one of these ones where it's like, it's not clear to tell where exactly this plays in the game because of all the different stems and trying to combine it all together. But there's just different elements here in play with this one that it catches your ear. I think it makes it memorable to me listening to it. Whether it's the whoop whoop kind of sound there, or this that echoing ending string bit at the end of the clip there, like these things are just, it's so Western and they capture it so perfectly. But of course, it's this bold brass section that's really taking over. Again, it's one that just, it caught my ear. It had all these different elements of undeniably Western music, what we think of as Western music, and the punny name to top it all off.
See, this is gonna sound weird, but it sounds more like a spy song to me.
Okay.
Like I hear this song and I think like this is playing in like not a James Bond movie, but like a bootleg James, like a Bames John movie. It's good. It's just really, it's really funny to me that you describe it as like, it's so Western. And I'm over here like, I feel like this would play while James Bond saves the Queen from like a helicopter. And then they have to jump out of the helicopter. Then I started to realize that, those two, outside of instrumentation, those two genres don't sound that different.
That's a good point. Wow.
And that's a weird realization to come to be perfectly honest. And I don't know what to do with it. And now, I'm sure none of you do either.
Now I'm just imagining John Marston as a secret agent.
Make it happen, Rockstar.
I'm okay with it. Maybe that's what Agent was going to be before Rockstar canceled it.
We solved the puzzle. We figured it out.
I got it. All right. Number 5 on the Critical 5. We're going to tone it down a little bit again. This is Compass.
And I know the only compass that I need is the one leads back to you. And the burning blisters on my feet will call to hold me as I'm close to fall away from the home of your arms I stray.
This is composed and performed by Jamie Liddell. It's a pretty simple acoustic guitar piece, but you know when vocals come into it, like it's another important moment in the story. And this is one where, you know, John's getting on his horse. He's riding towards a specific location, and then this song comes into play. And this plays when John is riding back home because his wife and son have been delivered there by the government. John has fulfilled his promise, his oath to the government, and he's finally going to see his family again. It's a really heartwarming, important moment. And maybe the lyrics are a little cheesy. Like I'm coming home, like the compass is like kind of pointing home. You're going to bring me back to you. The only thing I've ever known. Like it may be cheesy, but after you've gone through this long adventure, it's so worth it. And it's a heartwarming, good feeling song tied with that moment.
I agree with everything you've said. This is the one that sounds like I would have heard it in Life is Strange.
Oh, see, I almost think the other one in my cutting room floor might have been. These all could have been in Life is Strange, honestly.
To be fair, yes, but this is the one. I think it's the fact that it's just like an acoustic guitar and somebody singing. Mm-hmm. Like always seems to bring up that like, oh yeah, I'd hear this in Life is Strange when like that during like an end montage that all those episodes had.
Yeah.
Something like that.
On my cutting room floor, I have a couple. The first one being Dead Man's Gun.
Your hands upon a dead man's gun and you're looking down the sights. Your heart is worn and the seams are torn and
See, I don't know. I think this one is pretty Life is Strange. Like, it is composed and performed by Ashtar Command. This is the end credits. And so, yeah, the end of the game happens. It's pretty sad. It's one of these ones where it's like, if you're a fan of video games, you can't escape what happens at the end of the original Red Dead Redemption. Like, I'm sorry, it is what it is. So I can throw up a spoiler warning if you really want me to. If you wanted to skip to the next game, I understand. But overall, just talking about the death of John Marston and how the government kind of betrays him and says, well, now you know too much and you've still done too much. So we're still going to, come to your house and kill you. There is another song, like there's like 4 vocal tracks on this album release. And one of them, like it's a slow baritone, just solo voice, but that's more like for the burial sort of scene. But this one is just like, you're at the end of the adventure and just feeling crushed. And so the vibe of the piece, the vibe of this song really, really plays well. And then there's the whole thing where it comes back 3 years later and you're playing as John Marston's son and you get to finally, take out your revenge on the top government man there. So it's a powerful overall sequence of events, but for this one to punctuate with the end credits here. It's a good one. The other one I'd like to highlight on the cutting room floor is Born Unto Trouble. And again, it's completely different. And you'd think like, well, that 130 beats per minute, like how does this? Well, if you cut that in half, kind of slow out all of the intervals for all your notes, you kind of get something slow and plodding like this. But it's just only a piano, a violin, and here you go, Joe, someone whistling.
Yay.
It is really simple. But like it's just these powerful melodies, the ba 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 ba. Like it, that's something that you'll be walking around this open world, and it just kind of builds up and echoes and just creates that feeling. I heard this in this track, and it's just like, oh yes, like this is Red Dead Redemption. I liked the other tracks more, but I felt right at least putting it here in the cutting room floor. So what will I never forget about the game? For me, it's just another example of like a revisited game. Like sometimes don't just give up on games because you can still come back to them, even if it's years later, and have really powerful experiences with them. Because it is such a near flawless experience if you really get into it. It was to the point where when people were playing Red Dead Redemption 2, which leaned in really hard into the realism of playing the game, people were like, myself included, look back on Red Dead Redemption, like, this original game was a more fun experience. Yes, Red Dead 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, Red Dead 3, a more realistic game, and it's more artistic in that sense, but is it more fun? Like, I think myself and a lot of people have more fun, more fond memories of the original Red Dead Redemption. So I don't know. Maybe, Joe, it's not necessarily a game you'll get to. I mean, there are others certainly that I've talked about on this show that I would recommend more first. But it's a great experience.
Meanwhile, I'll never forget that Tommy Morgan played harmonica on over 500 films. I still can't get over that.
If that's the one thing you take away from this episode, awesome. So be it. To transition to our next game, we like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix. So whether it's on YouTube or OC Remix, I found a YouTube channel called Welcome to the 80s. And they had a cover of theme from Red Dead Redemption, but it's a synthwave cover. And if you want to talk about a different sort of style from Western to synthwave, oh boy.
It translates so well, too. Like, weirdly well.
I agree. It totally does. Hope you listen to it. Hope you enjoy. And we'll be right back.
All right, it's time. Time to steal, not your heart. That's a different day. Maybe. Nothing planned right now, but eventually.
Spring 2020.
It's time to just steal stuff. And we're going to talk about my game, SLY 2, Band of Thieves. And I'm very much excited to talk about this game, even if I sadly did not find all that much about it. But it's okay, we'll persevere, we'll figure it out. SLY 2 Band of Thieves was originally released for the PlayStation 2 on September 14th, 2004. It is developed by Sucker Punch Entertainment and was published by Sony Computer Entertainment. It is a 3D platformer where the player takes control of the titular thief Sly Cooper and continues the story from the first game. As you might have guessed, this is a sequel. I know the fact that it's called SLY 2 probably gave that away, but I figure I should probably say that. It's a sequel to the other PS2 game, Sly Cooper and the Thieves Raccoonus, which was released in 2002. In that game, you played as Sly Cooper, who is a descendant of a long line of master thieves, the Cooper clan, stretching all the way back to ancient Egypt. Probably further. In fact, doesn't Sly 4? Yeah, Sly 4 has a caveman ancestor, so even further than that. So he is in this long lineage of thieves, and over the years, they have put all of their information, all of the moves that they have perfected, the techniques and all that, into this book called the Thieves Raccoonus. And one day, a group called the Fiendish Five broke into Sly's house and killed his father and stole the Thieves Raccoonus, ripping out the pages and spreading them across the corners of the earth to their various operations. And Sly 1 is about him going to the various members of the Fiendish Five, taking them out, and getting the pages of the Thieves Raccoonus back alongside his friends, Bentley and Murray. Bentley, who serves as the brains of the outfit, and Murray, who serves as the driver in Sly 1. And that's pretty much all you need to know about Sly 1 for the most part. Except for the final enemy that you fight in the game is a big old mechanical owl named Clockwork, who has been alive for the entirety of the Cooper clan's existence because he is so jealous of them and hates them so much that he has used that hate to basically make himself immortal, and then he replaced all of his body parts with robot parts because he hated them so much, and he was the leader of the Fiendish Five, he's the reason they went and killed Sly's dad, etc., etc. There, now you're caught up with the story. In Sly 2, it opens up 2 years after Sly defeats Clockwork, and he learns that though he might have destroyed Clockwork in the last game, his parts still survived, and they were recovered and brought to a museum in Cairo. And so Sly, worried that somebody might put it back together and bring Clockwork back, says, no, we got to break into that museum and we got to get the parts back. And so they do. They break into this Cairo museum and then suddenly find that somebody has already stolen the Clockwork parts. And 2 cops, one of them being a character from the first game, Carmelita Fox, who is basically a cop who's made it her life goal to take Sly to jail because she has a crush on him and won't admit it, and he has a crush on her and admits it fairly often. And a new partner for her, Constable Neela. So they show up and are like, "Aw, man, you returned to the scene of the crime. You must have already stolen the parts," which, first of all, doesn't make sense. If he already got all the parts, why would he go back? Like that the criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. That's never made sense to me, because why would they ever do that? Ever. The crime's done. They don't have a reason to be there anymore. Whatever. And Neela drops a hint that the gang that is actually responsible for stealing the Clockwork parts is a group called the Claw Gang. So Sly, Bentley, and Murray must now figure out how to track down the various members of the Claw Gang and get those Clockwork parts back. The most important part about Sly 2 is that it completely changes the gameplay flow of the Sly series. Sly 1 is a game, it's more a straightforward 3D platformer. Like, it's just got linear levels, it's got a map select screen, basically, even though that is kind of an open world thing, but not really. In Sly 2 and forward for the rest of the series, it gives you an open world. They describe them as jungle gyms, and there are various missions at various spots on the map that help you sort of build up to a heist in the end. The other big change in Sly 2 is that Sly was the only playable character, basically, for the majority of Sly 1. In Sly 2, Bentley and Murray also became playable, with each their own sort of drawbacks, and they were balanced to work very differently from each other. So, for instance, Sly is very fast and nimble, and he has the easiest time navigating the environments, but His strength in a fight is only about medium. He doesn't do great when fighting like the big guards especially. Meanwhile, Murray has sort of stopped just being the driver and has made the transition into being the brawn of the group. And so he can't sneak to save his life because he's a hippo and he's huge, but he can take out like big guards in 2 punches. Basically just makes quick work of any guard in the entire game. And Bentley, being the brains, is extremely fragile and also can't really sneak all that well, and he also can't fight. But what he can do is he has tranquilizer darts that can put guards to sleep. He can put a bomb next to him, kills him in 1 hit. Bada bing, bada boom. Perfect. So all 3 characters, like I said, work together to complete jobs around the map and, get ready to perform a heist. And then you get to perform said heist, and it's super, super cool. And this is the gameplay style that would stick around for the rest of the series, like I said. So, this is the part where I ask, what are our experiences? What are your experiences with Sly 2? Because you know mine.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I know yours, but I don't think we've ever sat down and talked about them.
No, we haven't. This game series is dope. If anyone has not played the Sly Cooper series, I don't think there's a high barrier of entry at all. If anything, it may just be the whole thing of, do you need a PS3 to play like the HD remaster or a PS2 to play the original games, which may be harder to find and come across at this point. But yeah, they're super fun. Can you also play it on Vita? Are these on Vita?
I don't think the Sly collection ever hit Vita, but I know that Sly 4 was on Vita.
4 did. That's where I played 4, actually. Yeah, 2 is great, because you're right, it does change things up significantly. The first game is as simple as PS2 3D sneaky platformers go. Like, it is very bare bones, charming characters, charming story, really sets the foundation well, but you're right. Opening up to these jungle gyms and continuing the great environments and great characters and everything being told like a episodic, like, TV show, sort of in a way, like with, the enemy of the week in a sense. It's so charming and such a great series, with the stealth mechanics, it's not Metal Gear Solid like levels, certainly. It's almost like, I don't want to say necessarily babies for a stealth game, but the stealth is pretty easy, all things considered.
Yeah, it's extremely easy. It's cartoonish stealth.
Yeah.
It's the kind of stealth where guards have flashlights in front of them. As long as you're not in the flashlight, they can't see you.
Yeah. So it's a super charming series. And I'm not just saying all this because I know it's one of your favorite series of all time, but it's incredibly enjoyable. And this is where it really sets the tone for the rest of the series to come.
If I remember correctly, we are the ones that got you to play it. Like me and Ben.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Ben he's coming up a lot this episode. Wow. He and I, that was one of the first big things that we really bonded over, was that by the time I met Ben, I had already played Sly's 1 through 3. Because Sly 2 is actually the first game I ever bought because of a TV commercial.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember the commercial at all, but I remember that I saw it and I was like, that game's looks pretty cool. And then I went and bought it. So Sly 2 was the first Sly game that I ever played.
But yeah, without the original? Huh.
Yeah, I went and bought the original afterwards. Well, I was a kid, so I didn't buy the original. I got my dad to buy the original for me. And I played that. I loved that, though not as much as Sly 2. And then Sly 3 became the first game that I ever followed from announcement to release. So this series has a special place in my heart. I really love it. Sly 2, I think, is outside of Sly 4, which, because just in virtue of being newer, I haven't had a chance to go back and replay it, and that, that kind of thing. I think Sly 2 is the one I've replayed the least.
Yeah.
But I believe it is also largely considered one of the best games in the series. I like 3 a little bit more, but 2 is very, very good.
Yeah, I remember that here's an interesting one. Sly Cooper and the Thieves Raccoonus and Sly 2 Band of Thieves were the first 2 games that I got platinum trophies for, or among the first platinum trophies I got on my PS3. Didn't get a platinum on Sly 3 because there's some garbage with those trophies there, but they're easy platinum. They're easy platinums too, so if that's appealing to some people.
Surprisingly, I've never done that. I do know that on PS2, I have 100%ed all 3 Sly games.
Yeah.
On the original PS2, I don't 100% games lightly. I have to really, really like a game to do that. So that should be an indicator how much I love this series. Sly 5 when. So there is not much on the development of this game, which I found actually kind of surprising because I remember there being like a lot of behind the scenes videos that you could unlock. But it turns out I was mostly thinking of Sly 1. There are some for Sly 2. I do want to give a shout out, by the way. Some of the information I got came from, because again, we sort of had to crunch on this. So my time to go look for information and go like really, really dig for like interviews and stuff was not there. But one thing I already knew and decided to go use as sort of a source, there's a YouTuber by the name of BMask who has done a big, long retrospective on the first 3 Sly games. Like his Sly 1 video is like 45 minutes long. His Sly 2 video is an hour and 15 minutes. They're fantastic. I haven't watched Sly 3 yet. Ben and I are kind of waiting to watch it together. It's apparently like an hour and a half long. Like it's a feature length film. But I'm very much looking forward to watching it. If you want an actual full deep dive on like even the design and how good this series is, 100% you need to go check that series out. It's super good. And I hope he does Sly 4, even though judging by his videos, he does not like Sly 4. And apparently that game is actually kind of unpopular in the fan base, which is news to me. So the first game in the series had done relatively well. It got a lot of attention from the gaming press for the most part, but like it released the same year as a bunch of other mascot platformers. So this was back in the day. I believe if I remember the information correctly, it released the same year as both Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter.
That sounds about right, yeah.
So it had the chips stacked against it already, because like those already had like Naughty Dog behind them and Insomniac behind them, like companies people already knew. And then Sucker Punch, their game before Sly 1 was an N64 game called Rocket Robot on Wheels, and they hadn't made anything else before that. So they weren't exactly working on name recognition there, but the game was charming enough that a lot of gaming press took notice of it, and it won some awards. It sold well enough, like 1 million copies at one point. And so Sony was more than willing to bankroll a sequel. But they kind of figured that they wanted to change it up a little bit. They didn't just want to make Thieves Raccoonus again. And they started to notice during like focus testing that players, whenever they got the chance, would try and like wander off the path. And of course, with the level design of Thieves Raccoonus, there wasn't a lot of path to wander off of. It was just a straight line from beginning to end for pretty much every single level. And so they were like, well, what if we designed gameplay around that? Because one of the big criticisms that Thieves Raccoonus got was, well, I mean, look at Jak and Daxter. You can just walk around the world. Why can't you do that in Sly? So they're like, yeah, why can't you do that in Sly? And that's why they changed to a more open world sort of thing. The first prototype level for that sort of new format was a level that actually took place in Monaco. There is actually video of this. It's one of the videos you can unlock in game for a certain amount of completion. I don't remember what percentage it is, but they will, like, with commentary, show you the first original level of the game. And it's unfinished, like stuff is untextured. There's a lot of boats. There's a lot of water. Apparently, at one point during the heist, Bentley was going to ram a boat into the docks, like ram a yacht into the docks, which I wish that would have still been in the game. But they were like, the level, as they put it, did make it into the game spiritually, because it's what really made the foundation more solid of, like, this is how we want SLY 2 to play. We want it to big, wide open worlds, lots of options, things like that. They also apparently watched a lot of movies like The Italian Job and Ocean's 11 in order to gain inspiration for the heist-based gameplay, which I find very interesting. I've never seen either of those movies all the way through.
Oh, Ocean's 11 is one of my favorites.
Every, like, scattered scene I've seen from Ocean's 11 looks great, and I have no doubt I'd love that movie. I've just never had an opportunity to just sit down and watch it, which is a shame. And I should watch it, considering how much I love the sort of format of how SLY 2 runs its stuff. Something I didn't know, actually, somehow, is that SLY 2 can apparently make use of a USB headset on the PS2, where, like, you can set it up so that if you make noise, it alerts a guard. That's weird. I don't know why anyone would ever want that. Like, people have joked in the past of, like, what if there was a stealth game where, like, the Kinect could hear you and you had to be quiet in real life too, or the guards would hear you. And my first thought whenever I hear that is always like, yeah, that sounds awful.
Your roommate or your mom or whoever comes in and is like, what do you want to eat? Mom!
Well, here come the guard.
Stealthy. I'm being stealthy.
Like, it sounds bad. I don't want to play a game like that, but it was apparently an option. I've been a fan of this game since it released in, like, 2004. I've never heard of this feature.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
It's almost as dumb as 3's feature, which, like, tried to push really heavily on it's 3D. We have 3D missions.
Yes.
The game, like, I don't know if you are aware. Like, you are obviously aware of the 3D. The game came with 3D glasses.
Yeah.
Like on the PS2.
Mm-hmm. The little red and blue ones, yeah.
Yeah, it was really dumb. I think I did it once and was like, all right, well, how about never again? Even as a child, I knew that was stupid. As for characters, apparently Murray was almost recast. Like Chris Murphy, who is the one that plays Murray, who I put down on the outline as Chris Murray because it was midnight. Apparently, like, they were going to recast him. And according to him, there's some podcast. This is again from the B-Mask video. He uses various clips of a podcast that apparently just had all of the voice actors on and the writer and the head designer. And I need to go listen to these podcasts because they sound fascinating. Where they were talking about having, like, almost recast Chris Murphy. And according to the voice actor for SLY, he was like, yeah, I did a session with one of the guys that they hired, and he was really frustrated because he knew he wasn't giving them exactly what they wanted. And apparently nobody could give them exactly what they wanted. And they went back to Chris Murphy because he was the only one that could. And I think that was a great choice because he is so good as Murray. His voice is so fun. All the voices in this game are really fun, except for Carmelita, who changes like, it's a tradition at this point. She's a different voice actress every single game. And I kind of I like her voice all right in SLY 2. It's just kind of weird that if you play SLY 1 and then she's got a Latin accent, and then in SLY 2 it's like, yeah, she has no accent whatsoever. And then in SLY 3 they go back to her having a Latin American accent. And then in SLY 4 she's Grey Delisle. It's weird.
Yes, yeah.
Like, it's bizarre. But, like, Matt Olson is fantastic as Bentley. I'm blanking on the name of SLY's voice actor right now, but he is absolutely fantastic. like the whole cast, just great. A lot of the like readings are very cheesy, but I think that works in the game's favor a lot.
Yeah, because it's Saturday morning cartoon style.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of those voice actors, because the game had a higher budget, thanks to Sony's support, they were actually able to do recording sessions with voice actors in the same room, which apparently they were not able to do in Sly 1 at all. And from the sound of it, like, this helped a lot. This was really fun. And they're all like big into improv groups. Like Matt Olson, apparently, he was like a friend of one of the developers through an improv group. And so he had a lot of improv skills and was able to sort of work through all of this. And they all were able to adapt to each other and sort of do lines on the fly. And it really shows that they were having a good time recording this script. Because the character interactions are what really make Sly 2 special. So it was relatively well received upon release. It is currently sitting at an 88 on Metacritic, which is in the higher spectrum of games we've talked about. Obviously, it's not, 95, but it's up there. Critics mainly enjoyed the story and gameplay changes, but once again, they complained about it being too short. This is the second time. So first of all, this is the second time in 2 weeks where I've covered a game and critics are like, but it was too short. Luigi's Mansion, I can kind of get. All right, I disagree with you.
The first Sly game I can get.
The first Sly game I would get, it's like you can beat that game in 3 hours if you know what you're doing. Me and Ben do that all the time.
But Sly 2 is like a dozen, right?
Sly 2 is around, like, how long to beat puts Sly 2 at 15 hours long for a 3D platformer. That is long. What is wrong with you people? This one doesn't make any sense to me. It's the longest game in the series. Well, I think Sly 4 is longer now, but for the original trilogy, it's the longest one by far. Because even Sly 3 is only like 7-8 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. Obviously, another sequel, Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves, would release the next year in 2005, which I did not realize they were so close together.
Wow.
That is impressive, actually, considering how much more Sly 3 adds to the formula. And then Sucker Punch would go on to work on their PS3 title Infamous in 2009. And they haven't touched Sly since, unfortunately. Infamous, I wasn't a big fan of either of them, any of them when I played them.
I love that series.
I think the first Infamous was one of the first games I bought for my PS3. One of the earlier games, at least. Might not have been one of the first, because I would have brought it up earlier if that was the case. But it was one of the earlier games I bought because of the Sucker Punch name attached to it, because I like Sly so much. And I don't know what it was. I didn't dig it.
Well, it's definitely very different than Sly Cooper, that's for sure.
Boy, is it. That's one of the main reasons why they made Infamous, is because they wanted to work on something different than Sly Cooper, and I cannot blame them. They had been working on those games for like 5-6 years at that point, and they wanted to mix it up a little bit. And they're currently working on, I forget the name of their current game, but it's one of the samurai games.
Ghosts of Tsushima.
Ghosts of Tsushima, yes. So they're currently working on that. So Sucker Punch is still around, and I think one of Sony's biggest second-party developers right now. Mm-hmm. For sure. There was, however, an HD pack developed by Sanzaru Games that came out in 2010, 5 years after the release of Sly 3. Unfortunately, and I don't know how you managed to find, like, you got so lucky and didn't hit this point.
I didn't have this problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, Sly 2 and Sly 3 work fine. Sly 1, for the most part, works fine, except for the fact that the best boss fight in Sly 1 is broken. And I have no idea how this didn't occur to you, because it's occurred to me on physical, on digital, on Ben's digital. The B-Mask video actually, like, comments on it, that it was a well-known issue. They just never fixed it. The boss fight that I'm talking about in Sly 1 is with Ms. Ruby. It is a rhythm-based boss fight, one of the cooler boss fights in the game. The cool boss fight in the game. All the other bosses aren't great. I'll say it. I love these games. I'll say it. The music desyncs And it's so frustrating.
Maybe I just got good and picked up on it visually as opposed to not listening to the music anymore. I don't know. I can't remember.
You're the only person I know that didn't run into the issue. It's bizarre to me, but I'm glad you didn't, because that boss is amazing. But yeah, the SLY collection overall, though, like if you're looking to play this series, it's worth the money. Go ahead and buy it. It's a good outside of that one problem. It's a good HD collection to pick up.
I mean, it's like $30 max if it's not on sale.
Oh yeah, you can get it for pretty cheap. And then in 2013, Sanzaru also released a brand new game in the series, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, but the series has been mostly silent since then, except there is allegedly a movie in production. This movie was announced in 2014 with a short teaser trailer, and we have not heard a goddamn thing about this since then. My roommate checks the Twitter at least like once every couple months, and they apparently have not tweeted since like 2015. That movie is not actually happening. They've just never like publicly said so.
There's another game with Sly Cooper in it that I'm surprised you didn't get to mention here. But when you talked about 2002 and how there were different platforming characters, including Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper coming out in the same year, PlayStation Move Heroes in 2011. It's a forgettable game.
See, that's not the game I thought you were talking about, because I forgot that game existed until you just mentioned it.
Had all three of those characters in there. Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly and Bentley. PlayStation Move.
That sure was a game that existed. Sly also shows up in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which is the game I thought you were going to mention.
That game too, 2012, yep.
So, yeah, that was a weird year for Sly to show up a bunch of times. I'm pretty sure it was just because Sly 4 was on the horizon. Mm-hmm. But like I said, series has been silent since then. I know a lot of people don't like Thieves in Time, I guess. I liked it all right. I thought it was a good game.
And there was a cliffhanger tease.
Yeah, there's a cliffhanger tease, and I think it's my least favorite game in the series, for sure. It's down at the bottom, but I still like it just fine.
Yeah.
And then, I wait every year for Sony to tell me a Sly 5 is coming, and every year I am disappointed. Because they're never going to make a Sly 5. And I just have to live with it. Anyways, the music of the Sly Cooper series, overall, except for the first game, was done by Peter McConnell. Now, Peter McConnell is a big name in game music. Something I didn't know until very recently. In the recent, last few years, I didn't realize how big a deal this guy was. And let me get into why. So he was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1960. We don't know when. I believe he's kept his actual birth date. He's never really brought it up, which, that's fine. He also goes by simply Peter Mick. Sure. So he studied at Harvard University in the 80s, and there he befriended a man named Michael Land. Now, he and Michael Land would go on to land jobs at LucasArts, where he would begin his career on the Monkey Island series, as well as working on various Star Wars and Indiana Jones games. He would also co-invent, alongside Land, the iMuse system, which I guess was a system that LucasArts developed to synchronize game music with on-screen events and also be able to transition from piece to piece seamlessly. Mostly for their point-and-click adventures and stuff like that they were making at that time. While at LucasArts, he also worked very closely with and befriended Tim Schafer, who still works in games today a lot, and worked with him on multiple games, which would lead Schafer to eventually approach him later in life after founding Double Fine to do a bunch of their games, which we'll get to in a second. He left LucasArts in the year 2000, so dodged a bit of a bullet there when they were... I was going to make the joke of and then so did everybody else. A sad bunch of years later. Because as people might know, LucasArts is no longer there. When Disney acquired the Star Wars license, I believe they just completely dismantled the studio, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, so that it's been a few years since then, but yeah, unfortunate. He did continue to contribute to some LucasArts games after he left the company, though. And he is, I told you this would come back up, listener, he is one of the founding members of GANG, the Game Audio Network Guild, which is an organization meant to be, quote, a global audio community without borders, without limits, and without exclusion. So basically, it seems to be a group devoted to helping people that work in video game music and sound solve issues in their field, keep in contact with their peers. It's kind of, it almost sounds like a union, but I don't think it is per se a union.
Probably just more like, a professional group. They give out awards like to Red Dead Redemption.
Mm-hmm. Which I didn't actually realize that came up in your research until you brought it up. That's a really cool connection, honestly. Because how on earth have we gone this far? And this is the first time I've ever heard of this organization.
I feel like I've seen the acronym floating around before, but never really through our research. Maybe just other points in the past. I don't know.
Like, this is 41 episodes, and this is the first time we've heard of this group.
Yeah.
So, as for his discography, he's worked on a lot of games. In the Monkey Island series, he is the composer for Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, Escape from Monkey Island, and he also contributed to The Secret of Monkey Island Special Edition. He did the music for Indiana Jones and The Fate of Atlantis, for various Star Wars games, including, and this isn't all of them because I only listed the ones that I recognize, the X-Wing series, Rebel Assault and Rebel Assault 2, TIE Fighter, Shadows of the Empire, Yoda Stories, X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, Episode 1 Racer, Rogue Squadron 2, and Battlefront. He did the music for Sam & Max Hit the Road, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, which is probably his most famous soundtrack by far.
Yeah, it is.
So there are probably at least some people angry at me that I brought up Peter McConnell, but not for Grim Fandango. And don't worry, I'm mad at me too. We will talk about Grim Fandango one of these days.
Yeah.
It's just that's going to be a repeat one day. He, of course, did the music for Sly 2, Sly 3, and Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. He was the composer for Psychonauts and is coming back for Psychonauts 2. Brutal Legend, Costume Quest and Costume Quest 2. Connectimals, if you remember that. So he, when we were seeing Skittles, he was doing the music for Skittles.
It's Rajan's little kid.
What a game to have on your list. Wow. Plants vs. Zombies 2 and Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, which means that he's the one that took over for Laura Shigihara after she left PopCap. That's really an interesting connection. Hearthstone, I had no idea he was the composer for Hearthstone.
Wow.
Which, that's a big name that is currently very relevant for reasons Blizzard probably doesn't want. And he was also the composer for Broken Age. So he's done a lot of games. He's big. So as for actual development of the soundtrack, there's not a lot, unfortunately, because it's kind of a double-edged sword when you're covering a composer that's done so much, because then you're like, all right, can I find an interview about this specific game? No, I can't. Searching Peter McConnell interview is going to get you so much stuff you don't need to know. But I did find a few things. Again, this was his first work on the series. Before this, in Sly 1, the music was actually done by Ashif Hakik, whom I am sure I will bring up on the show at some point. But he became the composer for the series from here. It makes heavy use of leitmotif in the same way that Red Dead Redemption's soundtrack does, actually, where it has a small little melody that you can hear in almost every song in the game. The da-na-na-da-na.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's like in all of them. And it's never been released officially, ever. In fact, the only soundtrack in the entire Sly Cooper series that has ever been officially released is Sly 4. That's it. So this is the second one in a row where these are just what the internet calls them. And also, it's a good thing Peter McConnell was the only one on this soundtrack, because we wouldn't be able to credit specific composers with specific songs if he wasn't. And he also, unsurprisingly, says that a large inspiration for both this and the score of Sly 3 were the works of Henry Mancini, which checks out 100%. So let's get in to those 5 critical tracks. First one is Museum. This is actually the first song the player hears in the entire game upon loading it up. It is a very kind of subdued and sneaky piece, except for at a certain point when it does do that sort of build-up. But then it goes right back to being sneaky, because this is the song that plays when Sly and the gang are infiltrating the museum in Cairo. And I think it's the perfect introduction to the new world and playstyle of Sly Cooper. It's great.
Yeah, definitely one that deserved to be here. You're right, like very sneaky like this. Yeah, good vibes with this one. And I just hope that Sly and the gang get to go back to Egypt.
Mm-hmm. That would be fun. And also, they kind of have to if they make Sly 5. They don't have a choice. Speaking of hope they get to go back, the next song on the Critical 5 is Paris Rooftops. So one of the reasons I've heard for why Paris is the first level in Sly 2 is because people played the short little Paris section at the beginning of Sly 1, where you're just breaking into the police station, and then you leave immediately, and thought, well, I want to explore Paris, though. And so Sucker Punch was like, all right, level 1, Paris. And that's where this music plays. This music is so French. That's one of the things that Peter McConnell does really well with the Sly Cooper music, is that it's a globe-trotting adventure, all of them. You're going to different countries, like in this game, you go from France to India to Prague to Canada. And it's just such a diverse mix of cultures and the instrumentation you would hear there. So like here, you've got the accordion, you've got this really nice bass part that I really, really like. I don't know. This is probably one of my favorite, like, walking around songs in the game.
Oh, gosh, absolutely. Like, it's not the best song in the game. We'll get to talking about that very soon.
It's not the best song in Paris.
But you're right. For the open world jungle gym-like map, this is not only the most recognizable, but the best song in the game, I think, by far. It's one where, like, yeah, I'm going through these songs again, and I'm like, yeah, this is definitively this game without question.
When I was, like, listening to because you send me the clips before we record, so that I can be like, well, if you need to change anything, I'll let you know. I listened to the clip, I was like, this is the main menu song, though. I was like, wait. No, it's not. This is like, that's how ingrained into this game this song is for me.
Yes.
That I heard it and immediately just thought, but this is like the main menu theme that you hear all the time. It's a great song.
It's just that much of an earworm for sure.
But the best song in Paris, by far, and probably the best song in the game, let's be real, is Nightclub. Specifically, the Lounge Lizard mix.
Let's
On the mic with a shout out to all my nightclub samurai.
Show your bling and let me shine you. It is literally impossible to talk about this game without mentioning this song. This is the most well-known song in the entire series, somehow. What do I mean somehow? This song is great. This song plays in Dimitri's nightclub. There are actually two versions of this song in the game, one without the voice clips and one with the voice clip. Obviously, I picked the important one, which is, well, the one with the voice clips, because no. This is the most important song in video games.
It is. It really is. Like, if you're hearing this song for the first time, even still, I apologize, because like a 30-second clip does not do this song justice. Like, you're missing the whole minute almost where the instrumentation drops out and it's just line after line from Dimitri.
It's so good.
Him saying the most random stuff. And so I think we could just play it for you, right? But I think to properly emulate it, Joe and I must act it out here for you.
Hell yeah, we should.
Keep it smooth, baby.
Walk tall, stand tall, feel funky.
Juice? Who's got the juice?
Get the kinetic aesthetic.
Yeah.
I love him so much. He's so good. He is the best villain in all of in the entire series by far. I put him higher than Clockwork, which is weird. But like, when I think Sly Cooper villains, I think Dimitri.
He's one of the villains that comes back as a party member in Sly 3. That's how important he is.
He even gets a cameo appearance in Sly 4. He doesn't talk, which ruins that, but like, he does appear briefly in Sly 4. He's the only one. For people wondering, you guys keep mentioning Dimitri. You haven't like told us who the hell this guy is. Dimitri is the first member of the Claw Gang that you take on in the game. He is a failed artist who tried to make it in the Paris art scene, but found the art community to be thoroughly unimpressed with his work. So out of spite, he decided that he was going to instead jump into the realm of selling art forgeries. And then he also jumped into the nightclub industry, where he runs the most popular nightclub in Paris. And the Cooper Gang must steal the clockwork tail feathers from him because he is using them as printing plates for counterfeit bills. And he is most well known, as you might have guessed, for his interesting method of speaking. And in most games, like, that would just be, oh, they made a so random character that speaks like that. But no, he actually has a canon reason for why he talks that way. English is his second language. He learned it as a kid by watching pop music videos. So he talks like a pop music video. He's the most memorable villain in the entire Sly Cooper series, like, by far. Which is saying something, because a lot of the villains in Sly Cooper are really good.
It is one of those things where I feel like almost, whether you decided this or I'm just assuming this on you, like, we're bringing up this game only to talk about this song.
Almost. Like, this song makes it worth it to talk about just in general. But our next track, to pull us away from our lovely lounge lizard, is Operation Hippo Drop. So I actually bounced between this and one of the songs on my cutting room floor, but to be honest, I think this is the more memorable of the two. This theme actually plays during the heist in Chapter 2, which takes place in India. I kind of consider this Bentley's theme. Because when you hear this during that heist, it's always while Bentley is doing something. Like, you first hear it when Bentley is bombing the bridge, and then you hear it again when Bentley is piloting his RC helicopter, which is sure a thing that happens in that game. Boy, those parts are bad. I don't like them. And this is while you're trying to steal the Clockwork Wings from Rajan, who is the second Claw Gang member that you actually meet and take on. He's a criminal mastermind who has made a name for himself in the illegal spice trade. And because he grew up as a poor, like, quote-unquote, street rat on the streets of India, where being poor is like, that part of the world, being poor in countries like that is kind of like not great.
Go read up on the caste system.
Yeah, being poor anywhere sucks, but being poor in a country that uses the caste system is especially not fun. And so, because he made himself rich through these illicit means, he kind of has this thing where he's overcompensating for, like, the fact that he's rich now. Like, hey, look at me, I'm not poor anymore. And they actually have to steal 2 clockwork parts from Rajan because he is in possession of the Clockwork Wings, which he's just using as ornaments. Like, he just puts them on a freaking statue. But he is also in possession of the Clockwork Heart, which he's using as a pump for his spice growing operation. He's a great villain. This song is fun. It sounds kind of like an older military game almost, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's what it always reminded me of.
Yeah.
But then my actual favorite song in the game, not counting Dimitri's Nightclub, obviously, is our 5th critical track, Canadian Wilderness Fight. Put more banjos in video game music. Banjos are cool. I like banjos.
And piano and other instruments. Jazz. I don't know if banjos and jazz go together, but can make it work.
I mean, if I've learned anything, it's that anything can go together if you really try hard enough. But yeah, this plays when you get in a fight in the first Canadian Wilderness chapter, of which there are 2. You go to Canada to face off against Jean Bisson, who is actually the 4th Claw Gang member that you take on. He has a fun backstory, being that he was a prospector who was buried and frozen in an avalanche in 1852 during the gold rush, and that he thawed out thanks to global warming in present-day Canada. And his big thing is that he doesn't really believe in, things like environmental preservation or stopping global warming, and he just wants to cut down all the trees and dam all the rivers for profit, or as he puts it, to tame the wild. And the Cooper Gang actually has to steal 4 clockwork items from him, being 3 of his organs. I think it's like the liver, and I don't even remember the stomach, and I don't remember the last one.
I can't remember either.
It's 3 different organs, though. They're like his internal organs. And they also have to steal the clockwork talons from him, which he is using as a sweet axe. Like, I as a kid, I saw that axe and I was like, that's so cool, though. He's using the organs to power trains, by the way. All of them have great uses for these robotic owls' body parts. It's super weird. But yeah, I love this song. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it. It's the banjo. The banjo is so cool, and it fits this position, it fits this area so well. And it's another example of like, if I played Paris Rooftops and then this song back to back, would you say, yeah, those are from the same video game?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not.
Like, it's just so, and yet they still feel like they fit together in the same video game somehow against all odds. I love it. It's a good song. So for tracks on the cutting room floor, you actually have 2, and by you have 2, I mean I suggested 2. And
Yeah, but you know, you kind of hit on all the big ones I love, and just want to be a good friend and help you, prop up this OST a little more. Just give us some more love. But they are good songs, and so I have no problem bringing them to the floor, so to speak. The first one being Pursuing Neela. Constable Neela is a character with questionable motives. I guess you're following her during this mission. She's usually going to guide you to some place where you can, she'll help you bend the law a little bit, probably to Carmelita Fox's dismay.
One of the first things she says to you when you meet her for the second time is, I have this key to this nightclub, and technically I can't go in without a warrant, but you...
Mm-hmm.
And you, as a player, you're like, oh, sweet, finally. Cool, that's awesome. And later on, you're just like, maybe that was too easy because it was too easy.
Yeah.
Fun piece of trivia, though, that I learned from BMask's video is that according to design documents, Neela was originally supposed to be Rajan's daughter. Which makes a lot of sense. She's a tiger. She was born in New Delhi. So it's kind of weird that like she goes to India and then never brings it up.
I do wonder why it was cut. That was certainly interesting. Second one here is Cabin. This one plays on the train, the cabin levels. It's still in Canada, and you can kind of tell because there's more of that guitar, the banjo, especially the slide guitar in particular. Just that really specific sound. So, yeah, it kind of matches up. That makes sense. More good music like this, kind of pairing along with the Canada section of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I mostly remember this song because the train heists are cool. They're probably some of the coolest parts of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main reason why I want to go replay this. Like, I want to go replay this right now, and I don't have time.
Oh, God, yeah.
My 2, the first being Dance with Carmelita. So this plays during Operation Hippodrop, which is when Sly has to dance the tango with Carmelita in order to distract the crowd, while Murray, up above, lowers down on a winch and grabs the clockwork wings, and then leaves. And it's just this wonderful tango rendition of the Sly Cooper theme. I absolutely adore this song and this part.
It's such a good cutscene. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you definitely hear some of like the da 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 da, or the da 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 da, like little Sly Cooper leitmotifs here. They're definitely all over the place, but I think it also definitely takes inspiration from Habanera, from Carmen. The da dun 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 da dun 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 da dun dun.
A little bit, yeah, I could hear that.
But it's Carmelita. Granted, she may not have the accent, but it's intended to be there.
And my other Cutting Room Floor track is Operation Thunderbeak. This is the one I was kind of tossing around, this or Operation Hippodrop. Didn't really know which one to do. I think it came down to, again, Hippodrop is a little bit more memorable to me, and also, like, that would have been 3 songs from Paris. And even then, I have to draw a line for myself at some point. This song, though, feels super heisty, and it should, because it's the song from the first heist in the game. It's, I don't know, something about it just feels like, yeah, oh yeah, we're doing this. It's got like a rhythm and a pace to it that really feel like it's all coming together. Let's do it. I think it's the woodwinds. The woodwinds really make it for me. Mm-hmm. So what will I never forget about SLY 2? The villains, the fact that it was one of the first games that I ever like bought based on an advertisement. Ads don't work on me anymore, but they did when I was a child. So there's that, I guess. But yeah, I like the villains. Sly Cooper as a series has fantastic villains. Like, just all the way through. Especially because it always builds them up as it gives them backstory before you've even met them, basically. And not a lot of other series do that, where, like, it's also hard because, you know, Sly is a criminal. And you have to, like, frame it in a way that's like, but this criminal's worse, though. Please trust us. Like, Sly's a good guy, but he's still a criminal. Like, the Cooper gang are breaking the law. They're not the good guys, but they are, you know, the good guys. And I don't know. I really love the Sly Cooper series, and I think it's high time I just go replay all of them.
It's a good idea. Good idea. If you go to a Google tab right now, just start a Google search, and if you type kinetic aesthetic,
oh no,
you'll realize that the first autofill right there in the bar on Chrome or wherever,
Dimitri, baby,
is kinetic aesthetic Dimitri. Like, it's a thing. So I will never forget Dimitri. I will never forget his song and the kinetic aesthetic.
It's a good thing to hold on to.
Gangs of Outlaws. 2 great games to talk about this. Again, you look at the thumbnail in the YouTube video and it's like, those art styles kind of work surprisingly well together. Well, it turns out the themes work well together. So I learned a lot this week. Hopefully you all did too. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at the Dobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want over at Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. Easiest way to get it, though, MP3 podcast versions, stores, podcast storefronts all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Just download it there, subscribe, take it with you in your car, on a run, at work. Just listen to great conversations about video game soundtracks, and we won't tell your boss. It's okay. But you can also follow us on social media at Soundchat OST. Interact with us there and give us feedback on these episodes and leave us suggestions for games that you'd like us to cover. The Spotify playlist has been a fixture in my car for the last several weeks, and hopefully it should be for yours as well. But for new additions, any new tracks being added to the big Original Soundchat Spotify playlist?
So I haven't checked to make sure that all of the Critical 5 are there, but Red Dead Redemption appears to be on Spotify. SLY 2, though, as I said, never been released officially, so it is not.
Yeah, these were all pulled from the official soundtrack release from Red Dead Redemption, so it should be all there, I would imagine so. Hopefully November won't be killing us, so hopefully we can contribute more to that bonus tracks collection there. So we've got something coming up there, hopefully. And also for our Thanksgiving/Black Friday week, we're doing a special episode where, because it's the holiday season, Thanksgiving is a crazy time for the United States. For Black Friday especially, go out and buy and enjoy games. But in the meantime, we're looking to take your Q&A. So if you'd like to ask us any questions that we could use for that episode where we're just going to chill and have a conversation and answer your questions, again, please feel free to interact on social media there at Soundchat OST. We'd love to get your questions, and we're already building some questions there. So that should be great. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Hiroki Hashimoto.
I will be talking about Junichi Masuda. Oh, that's right. We're getting to that release on the calendar. So that should be fun. Let's play us out.
So obviously there was no other song. First of all, I don't think I would have been able to find a remix of a different song from this game. But second of all, even if I could, why would I not pick a remix of this song? It's Dimitri's Nightclub. I found a remix of Dimitri's Nightclub by YouTuber Necyo, Necyo. So please enjoy that and keep it greasy sweet.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.